How's it going, everybody? This is Cameron White with White Light Astrology, giving you guys your July 2019 horoscope for Sagittarius, Sun, and Rising. Thank you guys so much for being here and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you, and I'm sending you all of the positive energy that I have for you this month. We've been talking about this month for quite some time. It's eclipse season that we've got going on this month, and it's pretty intense. We're seeing a lot of action going on, a lot of changes. We have a Mercury retrograde, we got the eclipses going on, and they're going to be gnarly. But the one thing I wanted to say about this month is, although there's some quite intense planetary transits going on this month, the seeds that it's planting, or that you allow the universe to plant for you, are going to grow really fast once we start getting into August and September, so keep that in mind. But we're starting July off on July 1st with Mars ingressing into Leo, and Mars has been in Cancer in your 8th house for quite a few weeks, and as a Sag rising, I know how awful it's been. And now Mars, the planet of our action, our drive, our intentions, is finally getting into the fiery, passionate sign of Leo, where it can do things a little bit more loudly, a little bit more brightly, sometimes act out of ego or out of heat of the passion of the moment. But the thing is, with Mars being in Leo, this is also kind of challenging ourselves to act more authentic and more integral with who we are. Now, Mars is ingressing into your 9th house, and the 9th house is all about our spirituality, our religion, philosophy, higher education, publishing, far distance travel, foreign languages, other people. There's a lot going on in it, but it's very much an expansive house. It's very much a philosophical house. And as Mars goes in there, you got to remember too, Mars is a malefic planet. It heats up, it severs, it cuts, it inflammates. Mars in Leo in your 9th house is kind of like acting out of your beliefs. Like, you know, if this is how you feel, if this is integral to you, how do you need to act that out? And the other part of this is with Mars being in the 9th house, this can cause some irritations and some troubles with your belief or your religion or far distance travel, but the energy is being implied there all the same. Then the next day on July 2nd, that is when we're having the solar eclipse in Cancer, and this is very important because, as you guys know, the nodes have been in Cancer and Capricorn for quite some time, and this is a solar eclipse where it should technically be a new moon. This is where things should be kind of settling, and kind of like the luminaries are one spot where you can focus on things. That light's kind of getting cut out in a certain sense, and this is happening in your 8th house. And so this is, again, a weird area to talk about because the 8th house has to do with death and, you know, hidden things, as well as other people's money, inheritances, and all of the weird stuff that you don't really know about. And so I think this eclipse is really going to put a big emphasis on those topics of this house for you for this coming month, but we'll talk more about that as we move forward. The next day on July 3rd is when we have Venus entering Cancer. Now, Venus has been in Gemini in your 7th house for some time, so this might have been more fun for relationships. However, is Venus the planet of value and connection, and she's wanting to have you indulge and enjoy the finer things in life. This has to do with relationships. This has to do with love. Venus is going into the sign of Cancer, which is all about not only trusting, empathy, connection, the essentials, and what is sentimental. As Venus enters the sign of Cancer, this is where Venus is wanting to value more of the deeper connection, the empathy, the trust, the protection, and the nurturing. But Venus is going through the 8th house, and of course the 8th house is this scary place that, you know, a lot of the unknowns and fears are kind of casted into the 12th house, not only the 12th house, but the 8th house. And I think while Venus is transiting the 8th house, I think this has a lot to rely on being more intimate and being more connected with what it means to be nurtured, what it means to take care of things, what it means to trust. And with Venus being there, this is kind of like finding value in the change, finding value in, you know, protecting yourself in a way. Because the 8th house, I always like to use the 8th house as like, it's kind of like you don't know what's going on. You're in an unfamiliar territory, and there's a lot of fears being brought up. There's a lot of people that you don't know that are there, and they're telling you stuff that in a language you don't understand. Venus, while she's in Cancer transiting this part, I think is a lot to do with finding more of that I guess a good way to put it is trust in yourself by nurturing more of what's going to protect you and what's going to establish more of, like I've been using that word trust a lot, but establish a deeper connection. Then a few days later on July 8th, that is when we're going to have Mercury stationing retrograde. Now, Mercury is in Leo, and Mercury, the planet of communication and ideas and everything like that, being in Leo is one thing, but this is in your 9th house. And now, I did already do a Mercury retrograde video, so make sure you guys check that out. But while Mercury stations retrograde in your 9th house, I think this is something to do along the lines of reimagining and revisualizing what exactly it means to be more authentic and what it means to be more integral with who you are. And I think that involves a lot of kind of changing and going through, you know, what things mean for you and what means what for you. And then about a week and a half, not a week and a half later, but about a week later, that is when we're going to have the lunar eclipse in Capricorn on July 16th. Now, usually on a full moon, like how this is going to be, you have the axis in your chart being lit up, and there's a lot more awareness, a lot more understanding, things are coming to a peak. But this is an eclipse, and so the light's getting cut out here, and this is also going to be on top of Saturn and the South Node and Pluto. And as Saturn and the South Node of Pluto have been going through your 2nd house and changing your financial matter, changing your perception on what you own, what you value, what you possess, I think this full moon's about really looking at the way that you've structured, you know, not only your finances, but also a lot of this is dealing with physical possessions and what you own. And, you know, what have you created in this area that doesn't necessarily work for you anymore? What structure or system have you implemented that isn't up to date anymore that you need to change? And also on July 16th, this is when we're having Venus oppose Saturn. And this is pretty important because while Venus is in Cancer in the 8th house wanting to take care of and, you know, find more value in this area of change, in this area of growth, in this area of fear and, you know, of the unknowns, it's opposing Saturn, where Saturn in Capricorn is kind of saying, like, you know, we don't have the resources to do that safely. And that's kind of like, you know, this is Venus in Cancer opposing Saturn in Capricorn. Saturn's telling Venus no. But I bring this up because on the next day, on July 17th, this is when Venus is going to conjoin the North Node. And while Venus is in Cancer and she's, like, you know, really starting to explore more of what matters, where more she needs to be nurtured and taken care of, being on top of the North Node, on top of Rahu, the dragon's head, what we're wanting to consume, what we're hungry for, where we're kind of charged or where we're, you know, taking direction, I think this is Venus getting a lot more clearer idea of, you know, what exactly its needs are and how she wants to go about addressing those needs and addressing the essentials like I was talking about earlier. And then 2 days later on July 19th, that is when we have Mercury retrogressing back into Cancer. And like I said earlier, with Mercury retrograding in Leo in your 9th house, this is kind of like maybe reimagining or re-understand, like maybe having a different understanding or perspective on what your beliefs are. And as Mercury retrogresses back into Cancer, back into your 8th house, that involves a change, that involves a transmutation of something. And then 3 days later on July 21st, that is when Mercury is going to go Cazimi with the Sun. That's when it's right in between the Sun and the Earth, and it's at its closest. This is, in essence, kind of like purifying Mercury's energy, getting a lot clearer idea of what's going on. And so as Mercury goes Cazimi in the Sun in your 8th house in Cancer, I think this is realizing what emotions need to change and what perception around your emotions needs to change in order to fulfill and be more authentic and integral with what your beliefs about yourself are. Then on July 23rd, that is when we have the Sun entering Leo, and the Sun's going to enter your 9th house. This is the Sun going into its domicile, its favorite sign, which is Leo. And while the Sun is in Leo, this is the main luminary, bringing the main light to things so you can kind of see what's going on. This is now the Sun transiting your 9th house, where this is kind of exploring and being more lit up about, you know, maybe this is a good time to travel. Maybe this is a good time to explore what you think or what you believe about yourself. And it's just a good time to put light on that area. But then on July 24th, we have Mercury conjoining Venus. And this is also really important because while Mercury is retrograde in your 8th house in Cancer and it's trying to logically make sense of its emotions that are in constant flux, Venus in Cancer is still really valuing a certain sacredity and a certain protection and nurturing aspect to all of this 8th house change stuff. And while Mercury's kind of like getting confused with it, as Mercury conjoins Venus, I think this is kind of like expressing a harmonious and more like hey, it's okay to go through change, but you need to realize what is important and what's worth protecting and what's worth nurturing. And then on July 28th, that's when we have Venus moving into Leo, which is way more positive than Venus being in Cancer in the 8th house, because now Venus goes into your 9th house, and of course, again, Venus, the planet of love and relationships and expression and all that good stuff, going into the sign of Leo, which wants to be noticed, which wants to be wants to have admiration. Leo wants to be in the spot, not necessarily always wants to be in the spotlight, but ends up being in the spotlight and might as well take what it can in. And while Venus does go through Leo, and this is more fun, Venus transiting your 9th house is bringing more value to expanding yourself and expanding your beliefs and understanding more of what you believe. And then on July 31st, we are ending the month with the new moon in Leo, and at this time we'll have the sun and the moon and Mars and Venus, and then eventually Mercury going into Leo, trining everything in Jupiter and Sagittarius in your 1st house. So why I bring all this up is while you're going through all this intense, crazy change this month, just know by August you're going to have a redefining new belief about yourself that is really going to influence that Jupiter in your 1st house energy of expansion and just learning about who you are. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for being here and liking and sharing and commenting and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys, and I'll be seeing you next month.